All right, guys, here we go. And welcome to another Girls Gone ... Where are we going, Rita?
Innovation.
All right. Who are we going to go innovation with today?
Well, we're going to be talking about Barbara Bray's podcast. And so she's a creative learning strategist. She's the owner and founder of Computer Strategies. And she's also, co-authored and authored a couple of things. She has a website where she talks about all these really awesome things about teaching and learning and life. And she started a podcast and she interviews all these amazing people. And she interviewed on this particular episode that we're going to be talking about someone that we both really like. So not only is Barbara Bray awesome, but who did she interview, Renee?
So today she's interviewing Don Wettrick, and he is just, to me, he's really inspirational because he really thinks about the whys and the hows. And of course, he's an award-winning high school and middle school teacher. I think I won an award for something once, and so I'm going to put that in my title now, award-winning teacher. I like that. He's for real an award-winning teacher, but he's also the CEO of Start Ed Up, which is kind of, well, it's a blog, right? And it's an organization where he features the innovations of his students and what they're doing to push the envelope of innovation. And I think he's actually still even working in a high school. Whenever I think about these people in the blogs and podcasts that we review, to me they're always living in ivory towers in Hollywood, but that they're still working in education just blows my mind all the time. And I want to, send my kid up there for a year in their class and then send them somewhere else for a year in someone else's class. So,
I know. And I don't mean to interrupt, but one of the things that I thought was fascinating was that both Barbara and Don both have experience in middle school. Did you ever work at a middle school?
I worked everywhere. I'm so weird. I started at the university, working in the College of Education library. And then of course, the next path in most people's careers to go work at an elementary school. No, that's really a weird path. So then I worked in elementary school, and then I worked at an intermediate school, and then I worked at a middle school, and I worked there for a year and a half, and then I've been at high school. But I never didn't enjoy anywhere. Some people are like, oh, you worked at middle school, or oh, you worked blank, but they've just all been such interesting opportunities for learning and development at different stages. And I found there was so much flexibility in middle school because they weren't on a graduation path. They didn't have to take this sequence of classes in order to graduate. So I really enjoyed middle school as well. How about you? I know you did.
Yeah, I did. I taught middle school for 5 years, and I feel exactly the same way that you do about the whole graduation path thing. I remember having to have some difficult conversation with parents because, their kids would be failing. Sometimes it was the first time that they had ever experienced that with their kid. Yeah. And I remember, having conversations with parents saying, you need to let them fail and learn from this experience, because right now it's not on their transcript that's going to go to college. Yep. It's not anything. Like, it is a completely safe place for them to fail. Yep. And I'm like, and don't worry, like, I'm going to be there. I'm going to support them. I'm going to try and teach them the skills that they need so that they can learn from it and grow from it. And I was really lucky. Once I talked to my parents, they usually were a little hesitant, of course. I would be too. But it was really awesome. It's a really great age.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And a horrible age too. You know what I mean? It's everything all at once.
Yes. Okay. So you are the person with the quotes. I think this is your librarian-ness.
Sorry. I was like, oh, I like that. I need to type anything.
I love that you do this. So what was your favorite quote for this episode?
So what stuck out in my head was the conversation that Don had with his dad when he finally decided he was going to go into education. And I love that because this quote, and let me share it with you. When his dad told him, his dad told him, Don, I don't care if you go into teaching for the next 20 years, just make sure you don't teach the same year 20 times. And as a trainer in education, even in the library and at my high school, that's one of the things I strive so hard to impart with my teachers is, okay, great, that was successful, but that doesn't mean you don't ever need to grow. You don't ever need to innovate and stretch yourself and try a little harder for the next group of kids. Don't teach the same. Well, and okay, think back to your own school days. When people were like, oh, that's so-and-so, he gives the same test every year, and they were even passing the test down in some instances because kids had copies of the test that he'd given, when your parents were in school. So did you have a quote?
There was a lot of cool things that you said. And now I'm trying to think of off the top of my head of one, but I didn't write it down, so I don't remember it. Because
you can just blurt it out when it comes to you later. You don't have to worry about it.
But he did talk about a lot of things that I thought were really relevant, especially right now. We, I think, are at a really interesting time in education. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for it to be transformed in really positive ways. And I'm hoping that that's the outcome. But let's get into it a little bit.
Excellent. So when he starts his discussion with Barbara, he talks about being deeply concerned about where we are in education. And I know you and I have our concerns about that, but he says that, he's so excited about the innovation, but he realizes that there's so much more to that you really can't innovate if you don't know math and you don't read and you don't understand our history. But there's a place within that daily time frame where innovation has to be built into the schedule, almost like Google's 20%, So what are your thoughts on that? I guess, what are your reflections? Do we need to be innovating more? Are we just miring kids down with the curriculum as it's always been, or is there a reason to keep doing that, but maybe in different ways?
So this is a hard topic because I do strongly believe that there are fundamentals that we have to teach our students. So like reading and writing and math, those are all fundamentals. And I think about how I was taught those subjects. Reading, I was lucky. I enjoyed reading since I was very young. So that was never a struggle for me. Teachers never had to fight me to read things. I was always reading things that weren't assigned to me. But I think that's not necessarily that common. For writing, I enjoyed writing and I always wrote my essays, but there was never any context for them. Same with math, especially math. I learned my algebra and my geometry, and we were told, yeah, this will be useful. If you ever have a house and you want to put carpet, you're going to need geometry. But it wasn't until I was in college that I actually used all of these skills, and actually in real life applications. And I learned way more about math by applying it in real ways than I ever did from, kind of the skill set. So I was lucky in that I was still able to learn in that environment. But I think right now, those foundation skills are important. I think we have to move towards how they are applied in context. But the real issue that really worries me is equity. I was reading this report by Reich and Ito, and I hope I said those names correctly, but they were talking about how even though we have all these resources, especially free ones like the open educational resources, that the students who tend to live in communities where there's a higher level of education and are certainly more affluent still disproportionately benefit from those resources. And there is some evidence that they can also help close that gap, but it's a little concerning still. And there's a lot more that goes into equity other than socioeconomic status. You know, we have underrepresentation of, you know, all kinds of things, whether it's gender, race, or other types of identities in our system. And so I think that's going to be, I think we need to start critically looking at those things. What about you? What's your...
Well, you've made my mind go in a completely different path, but to follow up on that, the inequities, when you look at school districts and when you look at schools, so, you know, an elementary school is predominantly female as far as the instructional staff, and but so often the administrative staff on campuses and at the district level are disproportionately male in the leadership roles, and not in any way, shape, or form trying to dissuade males or to be disparaging with them, but it's an odd misrepresentation of the dynamic of the group as a whole when 90% of the teachers are female and 90% of the administrators are male. So yeah, I think that definitely talks to the inequity. And in, you know, I'm not sure what it's like in Austin. We're pretty fortunate down here in the Valley that, I would say 95% of our teachers are Hispanic, which is great for a Hispanic population. You know, they're a predominantly Hispanic population. There's a greater sense of connection when you see yourself reflected in your teachers in that regard. But I don't know that that's necessarily the case everywhere. How would you guesstimate it to be in Austin? And I know I didn't give you any advance warning of this.
No, and I've actually looked at the numbers before, so I don't remember them off the top of my head. I do feel that we have a lot of diversity in our staff. I don't think it's. I'm almost 100% sure that it's not representative proportionally to our student demographic. Yeah. So, but I think that's fairly common in education. I think for living in an urban area, I think our students are really lucky because they do have people, whether, you know, who are representative of their identity. The areas that worry me are the rural areas. Oh, yes. Because, you know, it's likely that, you know, one, the diversity already is really low in the community, and then being able to find people who represent that diversity for those jobs is a whole nother level of, you know, issue, because there just may not be people who have the skill set to fill that role. So yeah, I 100% agree about that. So there was another issue that he talked about that kind of also, like, I was like, oh my God, I'm so glad that you mentioned this. But he talked about grades and compliance. So what are your thoughts about that? Because I know right now there's a lot of talk about that.
This one gets really personal for me, and I've actually been fighting this battle in my school district for several years, because in my school district, kids in elementary school, I would say by and large, are assigned more homework than kids in middle school. They don't get homework for the most part, and in high school they don't either. But, you know, and having had my children spread out over 10 years, I've gotten to enjoy the elementary school homework assignments, you know, for the better part of 20 years now. So my kids will have been sent home with sometimes 5 hours of torturous homework every night. But here's the kicker, Rita. They don't get any credit for doing it, but they have to do it. And so I just had gotten to a point with my youngest where, you know what, you don't get grades, don't do it. But Mom, I have to do it. The teacher says I have to do it. I'm like, well, okay, then the teacher's going to need to give you a grade for that. And I've even volunteered in our district to be on committees that re-examine our grading policy and try to encourage them one way or the other. Look, fine, give homework if you know, I don't think you should. I think homework should be done away with, at least the way we're doing it now. But if you're going to make my kid sit home for 4 hours when he's 7 years old and do homework at night, at least give him some credit for doing it. And in the years I've pursued this, I've made no headway. Well, it's important. Okay, well then give them a grade. Well, we can't give them a grade because not everyone has the support at home to do the homework. Okay, well then don't assign the homework. Well, but it's important. And so it's just a circular void of not making any headway. So finally, you know, like I said, I just decided, don't do the homework. There's literally no repercussion other than feeling like you're not in compliance. Mm-hmm. Sorry, it went a little personal there, but it's just absurd, I think. Absurd.
No, I think that's really important because in education, a lot of time there's a focus on the student and there's a focus on the instructor or maybe even the institution, but we always forget about the families and the parents. I think that conversation is increasing. I'm hearing a lot more people talk about parents, and I think it's really important that we do consider that viewpoint. I'm not a parent, so I value when I hear from parents because I would have no way of understanding that viewpoint unless I hear from parents. I know right now there's a big movement towards standards-based grading, which I 100% agree with. And some of the things that I've been reading with the constructivist approach, and it brings into question a lot of the practices that we've been doing in education. But there was a tweet that someone sent out, and it was like, I think I want to say his name was Steve Seward, and he tweeted out this little graphic about effective feedback, and it was really. Did you see it? I think I read it. Okay, so.
Right.
So he basically talked about how if you have a grade, then basically the student doesn't gain anything from it. There's no growth from it. If you give feedback, there is especially specific critical, actionable feedback, then the student ends up kind of learning from the experience and can kind of grow. And then in the third option, it was feedback with a grade. And then it was basically, again, like the first one, because people who got full marks felt like they didn't have to do anything more, so they just didn't read the feedback because it didn't matter. And then the people who scored really poorly didn't read the feedback because they didn't want to
hear about it.
And so that was really, really interesting. And it kind of made me think about how Dr. LaPrairie in our class
exactly
switched to more of a standards-based grading from a point system. And it's still basically the same thing, like, I'm not saying the way she's applying it is the same thing, but we're still in a university system where you have to have grades. So the standard is still tied to grades, but she allows resubmission of work, and
I love that. I am such a huge proponent of that, because if I fail at something, give me the chance, give me the feedback, tell me what I did wrong from your perspective. So, and give me the chance to go back and redo it so that I meet your standard. I also fight that battle in my schools all the time. You can't lose by giving kids a chance to relearn something that they maybe didn't get the first time. And I don't understand why there's such hesitation in education to embrace that, because that is literally the way the real world works. You do something wrong, you redo it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I don't know about you, but I look at the feedback a lot, and regardless of whatever score is attached to it, but I think we're kind of weird that way. And it's funny because sometimes she'll mark something and I'll be like, yeah, I kind of know that was kind of lacking. Or I'll be like, oh, or I'll be like, man, I thought I nailed it. I guess I didn't. So then when I do my next assignment, I'm, trying to
so much more conscientious of that one, and then I worry, okay, I've overdone this one thing. I've picked at that scab until it's bleeding now because I was so focused on attaining that. Good job. I think that one project that we worked on together, and I hope you enjoy this, Dr. LaPrairie, when you hear it, when my goal was to have her comment, wow, maybe less research documented next time. But I still never reached that goal with you, Dr. LaPrairie. I will do that one day. But, so this brings me to a bigger conversation, because I'm 100% behind this as well. But how do you do this? How do you grade like this? How do you provide this feedback in a class when you have 7 classes, maybe 8 classes a day of 30 kids? How do you conduct constructivist learning? How do you provide personalized feedback? And I think that's really the conundrum that we're in education. It's very likely that the majority of us would like to teach in this way, but how do you manage that with the workloads and the class loads that we have? And maybe that'd be a good dissertation project too. I'm not sure.
Well, I think, and I'm going to go back to my biology degree. I was actually thinking of one of my professors earlier today, Dr. Soper. When I did my undergrad, I did biology, and oh my God, they made us write so many papers, and which I'm thankful for now, because I feel all this academic writing is now easy because I understand it. But one of the things when you study science, you talk about the paradigm shifts that had to occur for our way of thinking to progress in new ways, so that we could kind of tackle all these new ideas and innovations that were happening in science. And I think in education, we're at that point right now where we have this paradigm shift from this old model of education, which was valid.
Absolutely.
It was 100% valid. For a very long time, access to information was very difficult. We did not have, it was in the early 1900s when books started becoming cheap enough that the masses could actually purchase them.
Absolutely.
So our educational system was based on a system where you did have to memorize things. You had to be able to kind of hold all this information in your head and then, produce a specific product from that information. So I don't want to discount that, because I think it was an educational system that was needed for the age that we did have.
Agreed.
Now, though, information is everywhere. I don't need to memorize something because I can look it up. And I think right now we're struggling with that shift. And it's going to happen whether we like it or not. It's just how painful is it going to be?
But I think even beyond painful, how do like I said, I don't think people don't want to embrace this innovation anymore. I truly don't feel that. Like when we talked about in one of our other podcasts, when teachers put up the signs, no technology in my classroom. I mean, everyone I work with now understands that. They're just struggling with the point by point. How do I enable kids to learn in this way, but still be the facilitator teacher? And I think that's a great area that is in need of exploration and explanation within our field.
Yeah, and I think it's happening right now. I think it's one of those grassroots type of movement. We're seeing all of like the Don Wettricks of the world,
Exactly.
Alice Keeler. we could keep naming people, but we have all of these amazing educators who have been really innovative, and they're becoming the leaders in our field for a very good reason. And they're testing things out, they're trying things out, and they're showing other people how to do it. And I think that's basically how it's going to happen. It's going to happen slowly, but it's picking up momentum. And I think one of the things that we, like you were saying, that this is the hard part. So how could you lead this innovation in your institution? Like, I know both of us do professional development. So how would you tackle this?
So I guess one of the ways, and we discussed it before, is by microcosms, micro examples within my school. I encourage those teachers that are willing to try it a different way, willing to meet the requirements of our school district's grading system in a way that empowers students, and not interpret it solely in, I am required to give 6 grades a week, so your 6 grades will be write this paper 1, write this paper 2. Instead, one of your grades is going to be, I'm going to observe your interactions with other kids. And so they're thinking outside the grade book. They're thinking outside the preconceived structures, but still working and meeting the requirements. I think for me on my campus, my greatest contribution to them is giving them all of the tools that they could possibly need to run with this. Now, they might not necessarily use all of the tools, like a class set of Chromebooks and, HD projectors and, whatever they ask for, I go out of my way to get. So the excuse at my school can't be, well, I don't have the resources. Nope, that excuse, that reason to not do what you're wanting to do, that leverage is gone. You have all the tools. Now what are you going to do with them? And in fact, I've gotten that feedback before that, I didn't really want to do this yet, but you went ahead and gave me everything I needed to, so I might as well. Do you know what I mean? Again, it makes me think back to a lot of the research we've done in our coursework over this program, and really reflect on the teacher preparation programs from the universities. How well prepared are they to teach in innovative, technology-rich schools? Are the education programs preparing them for that? Or will that then be our responsibility to, basically throw everything they've learned the past 4 years out the window and teach them what it's really going to be like to teach in the classroom these days? Mm-hmm. What do you think?
I agree with you. Absolutely. And now you made me think of I don't remember the specific quote, but specific topic that Don Wettrick talked about, which was he believes that we are in a complaint culture, which I think to a degree we are. And I think the key to that is having potential solutions. Yeah. So it's coming to the table and saying, here is this big idea, and yes, it's going to be really hard to achieve, but here are a few things that you can do, and just try 1 or 2. Yeah. And once you feel comfortable with those, let's add 2 more or 2 more. And
let's share it with somebody else. Share what you did, because I can teach until I'm blue in the face, and I can send emails and innovate, but when and I understand this completely, but when one English teacher sends out to the other English teachers, OMG, I did blank. Like, I've got this one English teacher who, she teaches the ELL kids. First years, just immigrated to the country. So our country. Here in my district, we call them RIM students. So we were talking about how they were having trouble with conversational English. And I said, well, you know what? Why don't you have them sing karaoke? And she was like, oh, that's okay. I said, because, it's up there on the screen. It's a great idea. it's less pressure. They're singing, maybe with the background. So she developed this program, which was Readioki. And so her kids in her RIM class, you can walk by her classroom and they're singing, 1980s top hits, but they have the English, they have the intonation, they're singing it with this, karaoke machine that we got her, but they're also recording their own songs with our little swivel and an iPad, so they can go back and watch and see where they mispronounced, and they can talk about it with each other. And so, it's just those little, how can we meet your needs sparks. And then when she shared this with other teachers, they got excited, and now she's presenting about that at different bilingual conferences. And so, that's how it has to be done. Like you said before, grassroots, teachers teaching teachers, and being willing to share their knowledge and accept that it's okay to learn from each other. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love that idea of Readioki. I'm imagining it in my head and I'm just going,
yeah, right? It's so easy and it's so fun.
And I bet you didn't know this, but actually Spanish was my first language. So when I was in school, I had to go in, and I was really young and I don't really remember it, but I had to do an English language learner program. Mm-hmm. And luckily for me, I'm second generation. So my parents actually did speak English. So it wasn't as, I didn't have as many barriers. So I think it was easier for me to transition. But yeah, it's hard work to do that. But in our district, we have a lot of opportunities for teachers to innovate. That we actually, there's an organization that actually gives grants to teachers to implement new ideas. And actually, I won a grant one year. It was a teeny tiny one, not like your crazy grant that you won. But I taught special education, and one of the big deficiencies that I saw in the programming was that when kids are receiving special education services in high school, one of the things that we're supposed to do is give them transition skills so they can effectively go from the high school environment and hopefully into a successfully transition into college or career or whatever it was that their goals were. And so I did a little pilot, and I think this is the key. You have to pilot things. Right. I did a pilot course for transition, and one of the things that I did is, and I think this is kind of tapping into Don Wettrick's idea of letting the kids, you serving the kids, not the other way around. So there were and I found it just so I could show you. So this was my lesson plans or roadmap for my my course. And so there were 6 areas of transition that we were supposed to target. And then I worked with our department chair to select kids that we thought could benefit from this type of program. And so I kind of already had an idea of what I wanted it to look like, but I was like, I'm going to take it to the kids. So on the board, I put the 6 areas that we needed to address in the course. And then I gave them stickies, and I'm like, I want you to write down everything that you want to learn that has anything to do with these areas. I do one idea and then we put them all. So these are all their stickies that they had.
That's so cool.
And so as we went through, I would be like, okay, so you guys wanted to learn how to make a budget. So let's talk about that. What do you want to learn? And the funny thing was that almost everything on here were things that I would have selected myself. And not only that, but they came up with things that I never would have thought of.
And it's not things they're teaching in class.
No.
Management, budgets.
Yeah, and they had so much buy-in because they wanted to know about it. They felt that this was something, a skill or a piece of information that they didn't have, and they wanted support. And so I just gave them the freedom to ask the question to be provided a safe place to practice it and then get feedback. So that way, when they have to do it for real, they were more likely to be successful. And
because they had experience, they had knowledge base.
And I think that's almost what we need to do in our professional learning as well. I think we need to provide those safe spaces for teachers to say, I really want to do this. I'm scared. These are the things that I don't know how to do, and I need someone to support me. And then help them meet them wherever they are, so they can grow in the ways they feel they need to grow. Because I always feel a little icky when people are like, teachers don't know how to do this. We need to do something so we can show them how. And it's like, really?
I'm trying for a little while. Yeah. Right? But you're absolutely right. This goes back to another podcast that we just did a recording that we did a few weeks ago, though. But you've got to have that culture within your professional development or within your campus that supports the teachers feeling secure and trusting enough to expose those weaknesses without feeling as though they're putting their own heads on the chopping block. Do you know what I mean? And so how do you deal with that when you see them so irregularly? Or do you think that's maybe an advantage because you're not on the campus, that they feel that they can share more openly with you? They're maybe less vulnerable in that regard? Or do you feel that they share less with you because they don't trust you or know you? We've seen in our conversations.
I'm really fortunate because since I'm a coach, I am 100% a support role. I have zero to do with evaluation. I don't provide reports on what teachers are doing or not doing. So it's kind of a fine line where I try and listen to what administrators think they need, what the district initiatives are, what the teachers are saying, and then what I'm seeing in the classrooms as well. And so, but I just try and listen, and I try to empathize, and I just try to help whatever that looks like. And I just let teachers know that I'm available, that I am happy to help them if they want support.
Do they reach out to you after sessions ever?
They do. Some people are more reticent than others. And it's kind of interesting, but I think it's the same thing we see with our students. There's some people who want to just run with it and play with it and figure it out on their own, and then they're only going to contact you when they have a roadblock. Yeah. And they don't need to sit with you or have a discussion. They just want to know, hey, how do I do XYZ? And then you tell them. Yeah. And then they keep running. Then you have your other people who are really like concerned about the process, and they want you to sit with them and kind of go through it with them step by step, guide them through the process, make sure it works, and then do that with them a couple of times. And, we have students like that. And then you have a lot of middle of the road people where it's kind of like, they want to see what it looks like. They want to see how to do it. Like, tell me how to do it. And then they go and do it. And then they come back and say, okay, this is really cool. I think I can do this with it. Can you show me how?
Okay, so you have just blown my mind here, because you've clearly delineated 3 types of teaching tech learners. And I think we really need to take a step back and develop what these people are called, because it's, are they visual learners? Are they tactile learners? Are they auditory learners? There have got to be some very specific, short of beginner, middle, and advanced words that we can put to this, so that when we have these conversations, we have this common language that we can communicate with each other.
So I may have some terms, actually. I don't know that I have 3, but I was reading, and I can't remember his name, the first name, but Knowles, and he has a couple of co-authors on this book, but he wrote a book about adult learning. Um, and one of the chapters that I was reading yesterday, as a matter of fact, they were talking about the field dependent and field independent learner. And so I think that's kind of what it speaks to. And I think labels, I think, or categories are sometimes important. And sometimes I also dislike them because I feel like it's really easy to say, oh, you're this type of learner and you're this type of learner. And you kind of pigeonhole people, where I think we're seeing this in a lot of different things, is it's more of a spectrum. So maybe field dependent and field independent are kind of like the two outer edges of types of learner, like people who want context and really specific and people who don't. And then, but there's a whole bunch of area in the middle too, where they kind of overlap. And also, as I'm sure you're familiar with all the learning theory that we've been immersed in, is that just because you are display a certain preference in one area doesn't mean that you're going to feel the same in another area. So for example, you probably are, since you're an avid reader, you probably don't need that much support. You'd probably be like, whatever, leave me alone. I can handle this on my own.
Exactly.
But, and I'm not making any assumptions about your math abilities, but this is just for example. But I don't know if math is a strong skill for you. In a math type activity, you might want more support and more guidance.
Only I think now, because I enjoyed them and did well in them all, but I have certainly not maintained my math skills to the degree that I probably should have throughout my adult career. So yeah, absolutely, I get where you're coming from. And that was one of the things that, and I'm going to ring us back in, Don's innovative, I don't know, institutes or whatever. I really want to, I'm going to look up more about what he's doing in his school district, where he has these 7-week innovation courses for teachers, because that is another, when we're leading PD, I so often feel like, all right, we've had our wonderful day, 2 days, great, let me throw you out into the world and see how you do. But I love this idea and the concept of a 7-week follow through, where they're actually innovating and creating on their own, and he's just facilitating their learning. We have nothing like that. Occasionally we'll get a grant, we'll do some sort of a longer summer staff development, but typically what we do is, a one-shot thing with minimal follow-up. And not that, I mean, that's not ideal, but at least it's something at a district level. Now, I try and meet the teachers in a multitude of ways to reach out to them however they're most comfortable with. But do you guys have any kind of innovative academies like Don talks about in the podcast?
I wouldn't say necessarily we have academies. It's really hard because we're a very, very large school district, and we have so many different specific needs. So there's a lot of, especially in the summer, there's a lot of professional development. I think our district does an excellent job of trying to provide a consistent opportunity for teachers to explore certain things. So like, I know we have a bilingual institute, we have a conference that's specifically on math and science. I'm on the technology, instructional technology side. So right now, actually, we're doing a bunch of trainings about how to do blended learning at different grade levels, and then, tech skills or different things. So two of my colleagues actually just put an amazing unconference, which was really awesome. But yeah, I think it's hard to do because teacher time is so precious, and they need the summer to recharge. And then school time is so valuable, and there's already so many things that they have to do. So finding the right way to do it is, yeah. And there's different challenges, because I know there's people who work in really small school districts, and that's a different challenge than what I have. I mean, we have like 80,000 students, and I don't even remember how many teachers that is, but that's a lot. There's probably, I would say that maybe in some of our high schools in particular, larger ones, we probably have more teachers in a school.
Some school districts.
School districts.
We've got 2 high schools in my school district. How many do you have? 200?
No, not that many. I think we have. I'm horrible. I'm horrible with memorizing facts, because I can look them up, Renee.
I don't have to know 2. It's not that hard. Mine and the other one.
I think we have 13, if I'm remembering correctly, and that's not counting specialized campuses that have specific supports. But yeah, I think we have 13.
So has your school district, Don talks about, we really need to switch our focus to kids learning how to interpret data. And that made me think, oh, what stats math class? I'm not sure what math class that would be, which made me think about, does your school district, have they started doing like innovative or specialized campuses where you have a medical campus for kids interested in doing things like that, data campus? Yeah.
I don't know that we have campuses. We have, so a few years ago now, the state of Texas passed that bill where you have the endorsements for different, skills. So there's like a humanities one and an arts one and different things like that. So there are specific programs at different schools, sometimes in multiple schools. You might have the same program. So we do have those opportunities for students. One of the things that our district is also doing really well is trying to target the digital citizenship, which I know digital citizenship usually implies social skills online predominantly, but there's a lot in there about information literacy, which I think data would fall into that. And then
well done. Beautiful.
Yeah. And then our team are huge proponents of blended learning, and we look to the Highlander Institute. They have 5 shifts that teachers should make towards blended learning. 2 of them are student directing the learning and student setting goals. And I think those 2, when you combine them together, it's having the student look at their own data and their own performance, and then being able to extrapolate their next steps for growth. And I think that is data literacy at its most fundamental for education. I don't know. How about you? What are you seeing where you are?
That's brilliant. So the most recent thing I've seen and pushed on my school district is the Google. Did you see what Google put out over the summer for digital citizenship? It's amazing. Pre-made lessons that, and I'm going to draw a blank. Oh my gosh. That you open up and it creates kind of like making the copy, but each of the kids get their own copy, and it's probably 20 or 25 lessons. And so we use this, some of the technology, because we have to teach this and our schools have to become certified every year. And it was just a great, wonderful, certainly usable, and I'm going to try it in high school, although it seems a little not immature, but not, I'm not sure high school is its target audience, but we're going to build off of it. But it seems like an amazing, because, if you've done Common Sense Learning or you've done some of these other Highlander Institutes, sometimes the curriculum doesn't always change year to year. And so your kids are like, well, why am I watching this same video? And so it was nice to see Google throw out a new curriculum that we can incorporate in our classrooms. And it's so well done. If you haven't had a chance out there in the universe, take a look at that curriculum. And it's very interactive, and it's well put together.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check it out.
You're gonna have to check it out because it's fabulous.
I think they had one, but I didn't know that they added to it.
Oh yeah.
So that's really awesome. Okay, so we're gonna have to wrap it up. Yeah. So yes,
fine.
We have to.
But the longer we stay on, the longer Dr. LaPrairie. No, I'm teasing. We're teasing you, Dr. LaPrairie. No.
I know. You did this to us. You have to suffer with us. Okay. So Dawn talks in the end about DMing with gratitude. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. And this is actually something I've tried to practice for years, and it waxes and wanes my ability to remember to do it. So this kind of sparked a challenge, because challenges are the thing. My 11-year-old was doing a Sprite and banana challenge for himself yesterday and was just humiliated that I hadn't heard of the Sprite banana challenge. But so he talks about showing gratitude. And we could show gratitude in a myriad of ways, but he specifies doing it in a direct message because it puts a little bit less pressure on the recipient of the gratitude, because not everyone is comfortable being that, patted on the back publicly to that degree. And I've tried to do handwritten notes for years. I email. And to me, I think for the challenge I'm going to issue you can do it in whatever way you think appropriate for the recipient. So I'm going to challenge you, and we'll have to talk about when we want this to start, showing gratitude to people in our lives, because not only is that a great way to help us reflect, but it's a great way to build our leadership skills and our teams that we work amongst. So for 1 month, whenever we decide to start, I'm going to challenge us to express our gratitude daily to someone in our lives. And maybe we can wait until you go back to work, next week? So that's not a big tomorrow. That would be next, right? Or do you want to maybe give it a couple of weeks to get prepared for it? Or do you just want to launch right into the challenge?
No, we're just going to go into it.
We're going to do it. Excellent. So you're going to have to express your gratitude.
Yeah. You drop the gauntlet. I'm picking it up.
There we go. Yay! And I would really like us to then reflect on that in one of our conversations and see what the results of that were, how that impacted our relationships, and even just our understanding of the people around us. I think it'll be a great practice for us.
I agree 100%. And we're also going to be switching tactics for the next couple weeks too. We're going to be looking at a couple of books. Yeah. So we're each going to read a different one. So we're not going to spoil the surprise though.
But we're going to talk about them in our conversations, because wow, there have been some amazing books brought to our attention that talk about leadership, and leadership in different worlds and in different institutions, different industries. And I don't know about you, I just kind of want to read them all now, which won't make me very productive for the rest of this semester. Sorry, I couldn't do your homework. I was reading that book you recommended.
I know. I have a pile of books that I'm still trying to read. Right now, I am super thankful for audiobooks, because
Amen. I'm always super thankful.
All of those hours I spend driving, I am now learning.
And there's got to be a research study out there that supports that, keeping people calmer in long commutes, listening to inspiring, not just music, but informational audio as well. Mm-hmm. So do you have anything else to say? This is our last we have to do it for a grade kind of conversation. Next, they're just for us.
But we're not doing it for a
in
grade.
the world.
We're doing it for our own learning. Absolutely. At least I am.
Me too. And I learned so much more in this conversation. And I don't know. I think I'm even happier in graduate school having this connection with you as consistently as we do. I don't feel as unmoored, drifting in the ocean in the world of asynchronous graduate school by having these conversations.
And I think this is also a really good example of how you can have something in an assignment, and we kind of had our own take on it, and we decided to kind of enter into this with the idea that we're going to continue this, not because we have to, but because we find it so valuable. So, I mean, this is what the future of education looks like, inspiring your learners to, go forth.
Exactly. I like that. And we're actually going to get to see each other this week in IRL. I'm so excited.
I know.
Go check out some South by Southwest information. That's going to make us so cool with our peeps back at school.
I know.
We'll have to buy the t-shirt when we're there.
Okay.
Later. Thank you for a great conversation, Rita. Bye-bye.
Yeah.